Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, brought to you by Techstrong and Optimix. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting presentation ahead, but first I have just a couple of housekeeping notes. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, or you'd like to rewatch, listen later, or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, we want you to send those in using the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. This is also where you're going to find the chat tab, where we want you to engage with your fellow audience members or let us know your thoughts about today's content. We will also have a poll near the beginning and another near the end of today's webinar. And I will also point out that there are some handouts located in the handout section for you to download and aid in today's information. Finally, before we close today, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around. Our topic today is modernizing Jenkins pipelines with CD automation. And joining me is Asha Owen, Head of Product Marketing at Optimix, and Gopi Ravala, CTO at Optimix. It is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Ash, but thank you both so much for being here with me today.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Cody. Let's make sure I got the slides up. There you go. So modernizing Jenkins pipeline with CD automation. Gopi and I are delighted to be here. We're going to throw up a quick poll just to get you up and running. So there you go. Are you using one or more advanced deployment strategies? And the choices today are Canary, Blue-Green, Progressive, or maybe a Dark Watch. And we'll give it a few seconds, and Cody, let us know when you think it's appropriate. We'll throw the results up. I will say that I'm seeing a lot of interest in deployment strategies, particularly as people move to the cloud and look to expedite their deployment frequency and make their deployments safe and reliable. So that's one of the questions we have here. We have another one a bit later on. Awesome. Thank you very much. That's interesting. Oh, Gopi, any thoughts there?
That is interesting. We may have made a radio button instead of the checkbox. It's possible that they are doing multiple. It is quite interesting that progressive strategies that is the highest there.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me though.
Yeah,
I think we're seeing a lot of interest in progressive.
it's consistent with what we are seeing in the industry.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. So let's hit the presentation. So the title of the presentation is Modernizing Jenkins with CD Automation. But I thought what we'd do is just to start things off is to reorient you on the Optimix vision, mission, and strategy, why we differentiate and why we add value, considerable value to Jenkins. So our vision is to deliver software without any human intervention. And there are some tremendous benefits for doing that, removing the human toil, etc. And our mission is to help companies deliver software efficiently, faster, safely, allowing you to adapt to changing business needs, because unfortunately business needs do change, and eliminating what I prefer to call human toil and user frustration. I've been in this business 30 odd years, and here at Optimix, where we automate everything from code check-in to multi-cloud deployment and apply AI and ML, we're making some tremendous improvements. And our strategy, of course, is to build the central nervous system for software delivery. And we do that through our data and intelligence technology that allows us to accelerate, allows you to accelerate software delivery. So that reorientates you there. Now, notice we don't do scripting. So what is it that we hear from customers? Or what is it that we hear from customers with Jenkins? What do they want from us? And here's a couple of things that I'm going to take you through, and then we'll walk through some slides with Gopi. And I think you'll find some of the discussions quite interesting. So the first one is that everyone is on the mission to improve or advance their software delivery performance. And that's typically measured with DORA metrics, or maybe your own accelerate metrics. You may refer to them as accelerate metrics. And while software development has certainly become quicker and easier, software delivery performance has really started to become a bottleneck, whether it's bottlenecked at test, whether it's bottlenecked at verification, whether it's bottlenecked deployment verification time, etc. So what are teams up against? And I would say they're up against a couple of things. Complexity of cloud migration and cloud native architecture. That's a massive change for development teams that are coming from legendary, I want to say legacy, technologies to cloud and cloud native architectures. Second, delivery of increasing velocity. Now they've got microservices, their deployment frequency increases, they're using containers. So there are many things that are now happening within the application delivery perspective that are real challenges. There's exponential human toil. I was talking to a customer the other day whose lead engineers were spending 3 to 4 hours on every canary analysis, reviewing log files. And I thought, good Lord, why are they spending 3 to 4 hours on every canary release? We can automate that with NLP. So there's a huge opportunity to address the human toll of modern software delivery demands. And at the same time, whether you're working in project teams or product teams, we want to connect the teams. We want to connect the teams across dev, ops, security, site reliability engineering, and the business. And finally, the business and indeed the teams themselves want complete visibility and deep insights so they can remediate post-production issues or even pre-production issues so they can maintain positive business outcomes. So when you think about it, when you net it out, there are 4 challenges that we hear from customers with Jenkins, customers who've got a CI value chain that isn't delivering the software delivery performance that they need. The first is around deployment complexity. And that's really about making safe, easy, and scalable deployment to multi-cloud environments. We also do hybrid and on-prem. Second one is around workflow orchestration. That is orchestrating and connecting your preferred CI tool with your CD pipeline and your DevOps tool chain. And more importantly, not integrating just the tool chain, but gathering the insights from the tools, applying AI and ML to be informed in real time about deployment risks. And we'll talk a little bit about that one too. And the third one is around security and compliance automation. In particular, application code security. Policy as code, you'll hear about this in a second. Open source compliance around the code that you're operating, and consistent policies. And the fourth one is one where you start to hear more and more, and frankly, you need to do the first 3 before you can really do the fourth. And that is moving from a you build it, ops runs it kind of mantra to you build it, you run it. And I'm going to say brackets with accountability, plus separation of concerns as well. Okay, so Gopi are going to tag team on the following slides. The first one is around deployment complexity. I've laid it out, but I'll cover the first bit and then Gopi will give some color commentary as we go. Make deployment simple. Please make deployment simple. No scripting. Make it seamless. Provide automatic rollback, or roll forward is probably the better one. Make deployment safer and easy. Whether you're doing canary, blue-green, progressive, provide them the options so they can choose the right safe deployment strategy, again, with automated rollback. And then make deployment scalable. It's one thing to help me with my pipeline, but what about the tens, hundreds of pipelines that I have within my organization? How can we scale that to the tens and hundreds of developers and groups? So Gopi, why don't you give some color commentary on what you're seeing here in the market?
Yeah, thanks, Ash. So underlying all of this is essentially the drive to increase the velocity of the changes that they're delivering software, right? Either to their customers. It's essentially the goal is to incremental changes deliver faster, but at the same time being highly reliable. So I give an example. One of the organizations they work with, they had deployment to the ECS. So this is essentially an SRE group trying to do the deployments, and they had scripting that was done with the Jenkins deploying, and they were growing fast. With that, they realized their applications are actually not just in one region, one cluster, but they had multiple clusters, multiple regions. And as the organization is also growing with the business, they're creating more services and more developers delivering it. So for them, reliably delivering these changes quick enough to these environments with what they had was not sufficient. So essentially what you need is a purpose-built system that allows you to deliver the software reliably to these large environments. So that's where it's the deployment complexity here is more about delivering reliably for not just one cluster, but for a large number of clusters. So what they've done is provided that visibility, the tool which supported the deployment strategies to deploy to individual ECS clusters, at the same time having this pipeline visibility that allowed them to do the canary for one cluster. And once the results are verified, they would then roll out to the rest of these clusters and have that visibility. And any issue that comes up, they're able to, from one dashboard, be able to look at what all the issues are with the tasks, roll back quickly, and then collaborate with the rest of the teams and recover really faster. So that's a kind of a purpose-built tool that allows the visibility to deployment to the different clusters. And then to that, they then added the automated analysis. So as they do the deployment to one cluster with the canary, they can also do the automated analysis as a safeguard for testing the performance of the system or the reliability, measuring their logs and metrics in an automated way. It's giving them additional confidence. So now they are ready to roll out multiple releases in a single day with confidence. So that's the one of the things that we see that's critical for delivering it software faster. So maybe another example here is that reducing the complexity for the developers themselves. So as they move to different environments, as they migrate to the cloud, we are also seeing this multi-cloud environments. So that doesn't mean the same application runs in multiple cloud environments, but there are some services that run in AWS, some services run in GCP, maybe GKE, and EKS kind of environments. But if you can hide the complexity of this multi-cloud, the developers developing their containers, deploying to these environments in a simple way, then they increase the productivity of the developers at the same time, improving the reliability of their applications deploying there. So what this organization, what they've done essentially is use the built-in stages of the deployment to these environments. And the developers simply use those pipelines for the deployment without having to worry about individual cloud level complexities and treat the board of these clouds a similar way and increasing the productivity that way.
Excellent.
So yeah, go ahead, Ash.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to say, I think one of the challenges for developers is taking away the complexity of the cloud infrastructure and making it more seamless and intuitive for them.
Right. In this case, the CI part is still with the Jenkins. The only thing that they have done is this adding the delivery of that deployment. So Jenkins still does the CI,
Right.
constructing these containers, pushing into that repository, but then that triggers off the pipeline for the deployment, and now they can do the deployment to different cloud environments without having to ramp up the skill level of all the developers and hiding the complexity of the deployment itself.
Very good. Very good. Let's move to the next challenge we hear from users, and including Jenkins users, right? Is connecting that whole pipeline from code check-in to multi-cloud deployment. You've got various teams operating the workflows, dev own the code to test potentially. We've already mentioned that site reliability engineers typically own the workflow to production. We're really about connecting and making sure that we can seamlessly connect the workflow, that we automate the collection of metrics so that you can provide not only deep insights into the pipeline itself, but metrics around the delivery performance, as we just mentioned in the DORA and Accelerate metrics. And as we've already mentioned, we integrate and interoperate and ingest over 50 DevOps toolchain integrations to provide that deep, rich insights and automate approval and verification. And with that, I'll see if Gopi has some other classic customer stories, because to me, connecting the workflow now means you've got single visibility across the entire pipeline.
Right, Ash. It's so, when Jenkins also provides the pipeline, they also have DSL. But one of the interesting things that we see in the industry is most of the organizations that have built, they come from using Jenkins for a long time, and the pipeline structure with the DSL is not very common. So one of the requirements that we see being able to construct these workflows cleanly in a maintainable fashion is that the separation of the metadata of the workflow from the actual logic of execution of individual steps. So, for example, you want to have a deploy stage independent of the stages that you do, say, security checks, and have these individual steps have their own logic, that they have this input and output defined well enough, so you can put them together in a sequence or in parallel if needed be, and execute them. For example, you want to testing, you want to done them in parallel, being able to have those steps done in parallel, right? If you're using the programming language to do this, there is this tendency to take a shortcuts and get it working. So that creates this technical debt, and that's kind of what we see in the industry with Jenkins today. So there is that makes it very difficult to have any kind of checks that are done on top of these workflows. So one of the customers that we had, they had a Jenkins deployment workflow that was going deploying to the production environment, but they wanted to use this modern strategies of using a blue-green and say immutable server concepts, etc. So they had a number of steps. So what we help them do is break these steps into smaller pieces that have well-defined input and output. They had a significant amount of custom code that was done for each of these steps. So breaking them into multiple jobs and having them construct a workflow which included these jobs as individual steps. So we support tight two-way integration with Jenkins. And so we can kick off Jenkins jobs, take the output, and use those input-output structures to construct different steps within them. So what this helped them to do is use these deployment strategies along with their Jenkins jobs, migrate their jobs into a structure that they can maintain better, and also support multiple cloud environments, and also allow the developers to add different stages for them to test or to do the additional analysis, diagnostics into the system, and makes it a lot faster in constructing new workflows for the software delivery. Okay. The other one that they also were able to do much better is this approval. process. One of the issues that we see is that there is a disconnected workflows that happen. The developers, they do a testing, and then there is a different workflow for the quality assurance and security testing, and then there is a SRE workflow going to the production. By breaking these things into separate pieces and having this visibility into the entire workflow chain, they were able to build in a faster approval process. So someone who's required to give a manual approval to go to production would come in and be able to see the data that is coming in from security checks and the test results, and then approve to make it go to production. So the other example here that helps in breaking this up is this. One of the customers, they had a requirement for developers to use the Sarbanes-Oxley model to deploy to production. That is essentially having two people approve before it goes to the production. But there are some applications that didn't need that level of compliance. And so you could easily construct the templates with the same steps by adding, in one case, the SOX policy check, in the other case, remove the policy check. So they didn't have to do a lot of work to be able to provide these variety of templates for the application groups to adopt. So by breaking them up and having it a well-defined workflows that the metadata for the workflow can be specified in pipeline as code format, really helps.
Yeah, excellent. I think you raise a really good point there, Gopi, that there are different workflows or different pipeline requirements for different apps. One needs Sarbanes-Oxley, one doesn't, for example. And we provide that flexibility.
Right.
All right, let's talk about the third challenge. And again, we hear this from customers, many of whom have Jenkins and Jenkins pipeline, and that is security and compliance. Our take on this is that most organizations are now looking to do this, integrate app security into your pipeline, whether that's a security scanning tool or your preferred security tech scanning tool, and getting what I call intelligent risk assessment so you can make informed decisions. That pulls in the DevSecOps for approvals. So security are no longer outside of the pipeline, they're now participating within the pipeline on the approvals. Second one is around secure delivery process. And this is really where our role-based access control plays a huge part. We can implement policy and guardrails for teams. And we manage, importantly, we manage the keys and secrets. And I'll let Gopi talk a little bit more about that before I do. And then finally is around managing security at scale. And I like to consider this to be visibility into the supply chain health of your delivery pipelines. The fact that you've got data now that you can speed vulnerability remediation, you've got real-time data insights. You don't have to waste time checking things. And now you have security completely automated throughout your entire continuous delivery pipeline. Gopi, over to you.
Thanks, Ash. This is one of the big use cases that we see when we work with organizations. So when we define this pipeline as code, what that does give us this ability for us to check if a particular check that is required as part of the compliance requirements is being done or not. So why is this useful? It's because the central team is, let's say, is managing the tool system and also defining the templates to make it easy for the organization to adopt the required compliance for the organization. But we also want to have the flexibility of modifying or adding different things to the pipelines. So when the application groups adopt these templates, they can go change different steps within that pipeline to suit their needs. Because we just saw there's applications that have Sarbanes-Oxley, some may not have. There may be other security checks that needs to be done. So with that, when the modifications are done, we also want to be able to make sure the compliance checks that are required are part of it. So now if the pipeline as code as a metadata, we can ensure that the changes after the workflow changes are done, we can ensure that the steps that are required, let's say, for example, there is a requirement for dynamic scan, like app scan, that needs to be there, and the results are checked. We can ensure that the step exists in the delivery workflow. So that makes it easy to provide the guardrails to the application groups and ensure that there's a compliance that is there for any of the new applications that are being onboarded, or any of the process changes that happen, that they still have the compliance available to them. The second part is that the results of these security checks also need to be automatically checked. And so that is how we would get the velocity for the deployments of the delivery. So this also provides the visibility for the approvers too. If we want to go back and check for the compliance, is this check with the app scan done? And what were the results for that specific scan? So we can then provide the entire toolchain visibility and ensure that these checks are done for all the software deliveries that are going to their production environments. So the audit becomes fairly easy with this kind of a system. And one of the interesting thing is also the number of integrations within the DevOps toolchain within the organization. So what we've seen is there is at least one or two systems that are peculiar within an organization that they want to integrate because they've been using it historically. And that becomes part of the workflow and fairly easy to have that also audit provided in a central location. This allows for the best practices in opinionated way for the organization to provide the guardrails for new applications that are being onboarded, as well as enforce that to the existing applications.
Excellent. And then I think we're going to move to our last of the challenges. And I guess we're beginning to hear this in a few more locations. I will say that we're not all Facebook in many respects, and that we can't all allow our developers to go to production. And that seems to be an organizational decision. But as you automate more and more of the continuous delivery pipeline, you make it easy to adopt and onboard apps. You automate the creation, run, and diagnosis of the pipelines. You can start to deploy and deliver safely, and you have complete visibility. It then starts to become appropriate as to where in that pipeline can developers go in terms of their authority. What kind of things can we add into the pipeline? For example, we support GitOps, ChatOps, etc. And we've now got complete visibility into all stages and the tools. So let's have a quick discussion, Gopi, around where you might see developer first and what you see in organizations around these guardrails to ensure separation of duties.
Thanks, Ash. This is an interesting topic. What we have seen in terms of the trends is that with the adoption of the cloud, the central teams weren't ready to provide support for different cloud environments. So, there is this Lambda, ECS, EKS, GKE, and different VM environments. So the development groups started using these because they were able to deliver faster. So they started using their own deployment scripts and deployment strategies. Now we are seeing that since the cloud adoption has reached a critical mass, the central teams are now providing the tools and support for these different environments. But at the same time, they are not big enough to be able to support different workflows with the developers. So what then is the best approach becomes the central team maintains the tool, provides the guidelines, and individual dev teams maintain their own workflows and pipelines and their own applications. So that's where the developer first mindset comes in. The challenges that we just discussed in terms of reducing the deployment complexity, providing the ability to do a workflow in a consistent way, and providing the compliance checks on those workflows becomes very critical. Once you're able to do that, the central team now can provide these services to dev teams, and dev teams can do their own pipelines, and it's completely independent of central team. Usually central teams are fairly small and they don't have enough resources to support a large dev groups. So this is the only way they can do it, and we see a lot of interest in being able to do that model. So that what this requires also is this developer processes. So you don't want them to have a big learning curve to start using a new tool. So they are familiar with Git models, they are familiar with tools like Slack that they interact with. So if we can construct a workflows for them that the primary tools that they interact with are the Git and Slack or some kind of chat ops, then it makes it easy for them to adopt the tool and use it with reduced complexity for the deployments. So that's essentially how we work with our customers, where we generate these templates that allow them, for the developers to use this in the Git, and they would only come to the UI when there is some issue or they wanted to do some diagnostics on it or construct new workflows. At the same time, the central teams now have the ability to audit and provide for the compliance requirements for their organization.
Yeah, there's one thing, additional thing I would say, Gopi, is that what we are trying to do, and what I think customers are asking us to do, is make the developer workflows and the developer abilities as efficient and productive as possible, and allow those developers to operate within certain, let's say, organizational guardrails that lay down the enterprise compliance regulations, as it were, but allow them the flexibility to add their own.
Right. So that you want to give the flexibility for the developers to use the languages of their choice and the environments in which they like to deploy for their skill set and for their application needs. So it's critical for the tools to support those kind of requirements.
Yeah. And then and the backdrop to this, and I think this is the other thing, if you look at the marketplace in general, there's an increasing demand on DevOps skills. There aren't enough skilled resources here, so you need to be able to automate this as much as possible and drive efficiencies. Okay, excellent. So let's move to the next slide. And this is just one we want to have a quick chat. We won't take too long on this, but I thought it'd be great to throw up a picture of basically a pipeline where we're committing to a code repository, we're checking in. And this is basically the automated continuous delivery pipeline. Certainly from our view, applying intelligence, continuous delivery throughout that. And that you can add your own tools in here, and you can look and apply maybe some value stream analysis of your own existing continuous delivery pipeline to see where there's wait time, where there's wasted time, where there's room for improvement in terms of automation. And that's something we also see working with our customers and prospects, right, Gopi?
Yes. Yeah, so essentially it comes down to the flexibility in the definition, maintainability as you move forward, and being able to have some kind of a guardrails and enforcing the requirements for the security. Right? Essentially, that's what it comes down to. So for the best practices, you want to use a purpose-built tool that gives the delivery visibility and gives you the ability to do the audit on these systems.
Awesome. I think it's time for the second poll. If we can throw up the second poll. So, great leading question, right? How are you checking for security and compliance issues today? And various options. Number one, manual verification. Number two, perhaps you're using some custom service that you've integrated into your pipeline. Number three, OPA-based policy checks. And number four, none. So we'll give you some time to think about it. Gopi, while they're doing it, any thoughts? I mean, obviously, I know we've integrated OPA into our intelligent continuous delivery platform. So I think that's a real plus here. And we're building out policy packs, right?
Yes, that's one of the advantages that we provide is the OPA is one part, and ability to get data from different tools within the DevOps ecosystem. So let's say you're using SonarQube for your static checks, and you're using X-Ray for your binary verification, and then AppScan for dynamic analysis. So you have a number of these tools in your ecosystem. Maybe you have some automation with testing tools. You want to be able to have the rules that are built on top of these to say, what is your requirement? At what point you would say you can go forward with the production, or at what point you say you need to do a better job in resolving the issues. So that's where having the data from all of these tools, and then ability to use something like OPA to write the declarative rules on top of these data makes it very powerful. So you can now have any kind of rules changes over time. All of these, of course, is in the Git, and the rules changes that can be version control. You apply these rules onto the data. So the organization changes in policy or the requirements for the compliance can be accommodated in a very quick runtime.
Let's throw up the results and see what we've got. All right. So it looks like many of you are a custom service integrated into pipeline would be the top one there. Interesting.
So that's also consistent with what we're saying. So organizations that have built these policies, there was a need for it, and there were large organizations, they actually have a specific team that's building these policies, and then they use these policies for the deployment checks. So one of the issues, again, is the complexity of the policies and the change management and maintainability. So we are seeing a lot more interest in standards-based policy checks like the OPA. And also with the policy packs, now there's some way of standardization. You could then apply the admission control using those policy packs and OPA in a very transparent way.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's a tremendous amount of work being done to automate or at least to describe policies. And now you've got OPA, a standards way of doing it. It may be time to adopt that as a standard and leverage it as a standard across the enterprise, for example.
That's right.
Awesome. So in summary, we have presented modernized Jenkins pipeline with CD automation. We have talked about within Optimix, at least in terms of our continuous delivery platform, how we automate deployment complexity, eliminating deployment scripts, how we get real-time data intelligence. I think Gopi gave a great description of how we gather the data from the DevOps tool chain. And therefore, we enable the increasing velocity and accuracy of software delivery. More importantly, we give the flexibility. So we enable product developers and DevOps teams to be very productive. And finally, of course, we're automating security and regulatory compliance policies and audits within the pipeline. So to walk away with a couple of summaries, those would probably be it. I know you've got access to the recording. And we do have, if you want, you can certainly come and see us at optimix.com, and we are take a look at the SaaS trial for our intelligent continuous delivery platform if you're interested. And with that, we did the second poll. So let's move to answer for questions. Let's see what we've got. Participant 137, deployment is highly challenging, especially for multi-clouds. I think Gopi and I would agree.
That is true.
Another question. Jenkins offers plugins. How does Optimix support DevOps toolchain?
We also offer plugins, and we define interfaces that you need to support. You can have your plugins conform to that interfaces, and then you can drop it in. So there are two types of plugins that we support. One is the extensions as part of your workflow to run some things. And then there are types of plugins where you essentially use to get the data from DevOps tool chains for the policy verification within that. So you can do the extensions for those. These are not exactly like the plugins in the Jenkins, but you can extend the platform using the concept of the plugins.
Yeah, let's just come back to that multi-cloud deployment. Maybe, I think you covered it, but maybe cover it again in terms of what we do to facilitate multi-cloud deployment.
So multi-cloud deployments is challenging, mainly because there are multiple environments. Right? So, for example, you can have working with a Kubernetes like GKE, and you could be doing also Lambda and something with Azure, right? You can also have on-prem cloud. So one of the advantages we have, so we're built on Spinnaker, and the Spinnaker has built-in stages for the deployment to different cloud environments. It's a very large community supported by AWS, Google, Netflix, and these are built-in stages that have the best practices for deployment to these environments. So they have the strategies like blue-green that are built in, and we also support the ML-based automated analysis during this deployment. So you can combine your progressive strategies with this automated analysis that gives you a much more reliable deployment and confidence in rolling back when something fails. So for example, the VM deployments in AWS or GCP, we support this immutable server concept with built-in structures that allow you to use that for reliable rollbacks and the deployment speed.
Yeah, good answer. What are the best practices in creating reusable pipelines?
Oh, so because it's a pipeline as code, we are separating out the definition of the directed acyclic graph in the terms of the sequence of operations from the actual logic of within a stage. For example, we would have one stage that says deploy to AWS blue-green, right? So all the steps that are required to deploy a green version, send the traffic with the load balancer, verify the health of it, and then switch the entire traffic to the green, are all built in one stage. So now in your workflow, when you're constructing the steps that you would take in terms of build, test, security verify, and deploy, it becomes a definition of directed acyclic graph in terms of stages. And that's what you'll have. It's a pipeline as code, which you can version, allow the changes to these versions and check the changes also. Right? So those are these templates for these pipelines that you would share with your group or organization becomes the best practice for you.
Yeah, perfect answer. I'm trying to read this, but maybe you can help me. How can you define CD pipeline for Kubernetes? Any POC to refer using Optimix?
There is a deployment, and then there is a workflow that connects you with the different tools within the tool chain. For example, you can have Jenkins doing the build, pushing it to the Artifactory, and then kicking off your delivery pipeline, which may be just the deployment. And so we do have examples of samples that we build for these kind of workflows. You can check us out at the SaaS trial, or we also have a repository where we have in the Git, where we have all these sample pipelines that you can check out.
Yeah, we do actually have them. I think they are up on Git, so you can access them there. And I think they're included in the SaaS trial, or many of them are included in the SaaS trial.
That's right.
So if there's any other questions, do you see any other questions?
Is Optimix built on
Jenkins, or your own custom built? I think you already referred to the fact that out of box we're built on Spinnaker, but we're also supporting other CD platforms.
That's right. So we have integrations with Jenkins, two-way integrations, Jenkins jobs. We use Jenkins for the CI, and if there are the custom stages, that jobs that you have built with Jenkins, you could use them in the workflow as well. But you can think of it as built on top of Jenkins, not on top of Jenkins, but built in as a CD for Jenkins. So you can think of Jenkins as a CI, and then CD is the tool that we support.
Excellent. I'm just checking to see if there's any others. Let me just check the chat, see if there are. Hello from Singapore and Lagos.
What systems can the automation integrate with? We have a list of systems, tools that we integrate with that we publish in our website. Some of the common ones are your monitoring tools for automated analysis, the security checking tools like X-rays. We also integrate with tools like Jira, ServiceNow, and so you can get a full list of these tools from our optimix.com website.
Yeah, in fact, on the homepage, optimix.com, I think we do list all of the 50 plus tools we integrate with, ingest the data and provide, enable you to speed remediation and triage and approvals. Okay. I think that's about it. I'm just looking at the Q&A in chat. Okay, Cody, back to you, sir.
So Ash, Gopi, let's go ahead and give away a couple of gift cards, and then we'll give this time for any last minute questions that may come.
Perfect.
So these are for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our first winner is Annette A. Our second winner is Mar T. Our third winner is Mecca W. And our fourth and final winner is Jeff S. So congratulations to the 4 of you. Please keep an eye on your inbox to claim this gift card. And if you don't receive an email, check your spam folder. I'll also take this opportunity to remind everyone that today's session was recorded. Following this panel, you'll receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand. You can also find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and be sure to look in the on-demand section. All right. Not seeing any more questions, guys. Do you have anything you want to leave our audience with before we close out?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for the attendance and thank you for the questions. And if anybody wants to follow up with us, please do. we'd love to hear from you. Gopi, anything from you?
Thank you, everyone, for your time, and please reach out like Ash said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ash, Gopi, thank you so much. We'd like to thank OpsMX for sponsoring today's webinar. And before we close out, I would like to thank our audience for joining us for the entirety of today's program. We really appreciate you spending time with us. We ask for one extra moment of your time to fill out a quick post-webinar survey that should pop up on your screen here in just a moment. Otherwise, we do hope to see you at a future Techstrong Learning webinar. Everyone have a great rest of your day.